Everybody's enslaved black folk. And that's what a race was. A contest started to develop the Western world. The rule was he who gets there first with the most slaves and make the most money will be the most powerful nation on earth. And the race began. Everybody was in the race to use black folk except black folk. And began shipping blacks into America. And they shipped black folk in. They justified it initially by saying that it was an economic issue. Everybody knew it was an economic issue. It stayed an economic issue all the way from the 1500s up to the 1700s. In the 1700s, when the evangelical movement moved to this country, they switched enslaving black folk to make it a religious issue. Why? Because King James then wrote, when England took over the slave trade as the biggest one and started leading the slave trades and started winning the race, King James rewrote the Bible, called the King James Version. And even had, what's his name now? What's the writer? Huh? Shakespeare and the rest of them writing. All of them rewrote the Bible. And they rewrote the Bible, then since England was the dominating country for slaves, all the slave states were mandated to use scriptures to justify enslaving the black people. So religion then became a means of codifying slavery. And then the slave owners started teaching black folk that when you hear me talk about the master and the slave in the Bible, on earth, it's the white man is the master and you're the slave. And you're mandated to do three things. One, to accept your station in life. Two, to be humble and obedient. Three, to work hard and don't steal and don't lie. And lastly, to look for pie in the sky after death. And that stayed true up until about 1880. At that time, religion was the justification for slavery. This is important for you now. Slavery then moved from being an economic issue to a religious issue. It stayed a religious issue up until about 1859, again on the eve of the Civil War. On the eve of the Civil War, a guy named Darwin, Charles Darwin. Remember Charles Darwin? He wrote a book called The Survival of the Species, or The Survival of the Fittest. And what he's been doing, along with a lot of other pseudoscientists, was trying to connect a linkage between the lowest and the highest in life. What he was saying is that, is an amoeba that's that small, is it greater or smaller than an elephant that's big? Is a blade of grass lower in the chain than a tree? And they kept setting up these vertical systems. They call them genuses and species, going from the lowest of everything to the highest. But by that time, the white society had successfully redistributed by 1860 almost 97% of all the wealth and power into the hands of the dominant white society. The race was nearly over by 1860 or 1859 when Charles Darwin wrote his book. And they looked around and said, look, they're whites, now let's get to human beings. We worked out the relationship between between a bush and a tree and an amoeba and an elephant, but look at the black. The black has nothing, he's on the bottom, and the white master's on the top. He owns and controls everything with all the education. So obviously, the white man must be superior to the black man. And so then, all of a sudden, racism and the whole issue switched. Slavery all switched from being a religious issue, it became a biological issue. When it became a biological issue, all governments mandated that you must put a person's race on his birth certificate, driver's license, whatever it is. It became a biological issue. But the race was over then. When the race was over, they looked around. And since whites had used slavery for so long, whites own everything. Almost 100% of everything, 99 to 1.5% belonged to the dominant white society. The slave owned nothing. The white was on top, the black was in a ditch. The race was over. When the race was over and blacks had nothing and whites had everything, the race ended. And what the society did then, they took the word race, R-A-C-E. They scratched the E off the end of race and stuck a suffix called ISM. ISM is a suffix which means keep the prevailing conditions, let nothing change. And that's where racism came from. The race was over. Whites won it, they had everything. They took the E off the end of the word and stuck ISM, that's what racism is. Racism is a competitive relationship starting out to get wealth and resources and power. But what they teach you now is that racism has something to do with liking people, getting along with people. That's not racism. And when I ask people, I said, do you know what racism is? They say it's prejudice. You cannot eradicate prejudice. Everybody got a right to be prejudiced. All prejudice is you got a preconceived judgment or feeling about something based on previous experience. Right now, because of ice cream, I love burgundy cherry ice cream. So guess what? I'm prejudiced towards burgundy cherry ice cream. So now when I want some ice cream, I exercise my prejudice. I say I'm going to get me some ice cream, some burgundy cherry ice cream, because that's what I'm prejudiced for. Now I say, where am I going to get it from? I've gotten a lot of ice cream from a lot of stores, half of one worth a quarter. That's what Baskin-Robbins had the best. So now I'm biased towards which ice cream parlor? Baskin-Robbins. I'm biased to go there to exercise my prejudice. Now when I get into Baskin-Robbins, I'll walk up and down the counter, looking at all the cherry mocha, the black chocolate rock, peppermint juicy fruit. I look at all that ice cream. And then guess what I'm doing now? Now I am discriminating. I'm discriminating against what kind of ice cream I want to satisfy my prejudice. And so I'll pick, and I go down and I say, oh, burgundy cherry, that's it. Now, that prejudice, that bias, that discrimination has nothing in the world to do with racism. Don't let people keep tricking you by comparing prejudice and discrimination with racism. That's why all the gays jump and say, well, we're just as bad off as black folk. They're prejudiced against us. That has nothing to do with racism. You tell people, I don't care about your being prejudiced or discriminated. That doesn't bother me as a black person. I'm scared of racism. I'm scared of the fact that you're going to own and control everything. That's what you should be working on. So everything you do in this city must go after eradicating racism. Not prejudice, not bigotry, not getting along with people, not bias. You must try to redistribute some wealth and resources back in the hands of black folk as quickly as you can. That's what you need to be working on. Now, since we have never done that, and I told you slavery maldistributed almost 100% of all this nation's wealth, power, resource, privileges, businesses, and controls of all levels of government into the hands of the dominant white society, well, look at what's happening. We never corrected it. And since we never corrected racism the way it started out, that means in this country right now that the average white person in America has 3,500 times more wealth than the average black person. Y'all didn't hear that, did you? Let me give it to you again. You cannot be equal when the average white person in this society has 3,500 times more wealth than the average black person. Even if you're a middle-class black in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, the white person has 800 to 900 times more wealth than you. If you're a black female, that means the white female has $1 for every 2 cents you have to run a household. Let me even be, since you all still don't understand this point. In America right now, where you think you're so equal in Baltimore, that you're so free, that you can spend all your time enjoying life and not worried about what's going to happen to you, in this society right now, American society, I got 2 white men. I got 2 white Americans alone that have more wealth than all 36 million black folk put together. If I take Ralph Ellison and Bill Gates, they got more wealth than all the black folk in America put together. Where is your equal opportunity? Where are you equal? What are we thinking about when it's wealth that decides what you own and control.